Ashley here with HeartHookHome.com, and today we are going to learn how to crochet the Tunisian Knit Stitch. This knit stitch is absolutely gorgeous. It's very easy to do. It's one of my favorite Tunisian stitches. There are some things that we can do. As you may know, with Tunisian crochet, the beginning does tend to curl, particularly with certain stitches, including the knit stitch. This one has very minimal curling, and I will block the piece when I'm finished, but there are some things that we can do to avoid this curling so much in the beginning. We've got this beautiful clean edge, as we do with most Tunisian stitches, which makes for great borders and things like that. So let's learn how to crochet the Tunisian knit stitch. In order to crochet the Tunisian knit stitch, you can start with any number of chains. Here I have 12. The very first thing that we're going to do is I'm going to rotate my chain so that I'm looking at the back bars. I'm going to pull this loop on my hook just a little bit tighter, and I'm going to insert into that second chain from the hook. I'm going to pull up a loop so that now I've got the 2, and now I'm going to pull up a loop in the next chain and the next and the next all the way to the end of the row. So I'm going to have all of these loops on my hook. Now if I started with a chain of 12, that means when I get to the end here, I should have 12 loops on my hook. Okay, so now that I've got all of my loops on my hook, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, which is the number of chains that we had. So perfect. Now, one thing that I've noticed that does help the curling, especially in the Tunisian knit stitch, is if you do your foundation row and the next row particularly, quite a bit on the looser side. What happens is if these forward pass loops are too short, that causes the curling that we see so often in this stitch. Now that we've made our way all the way to the end, we're going to do our backward pass, which for this row and every row of Tunisian knit, we're going to chain 1. Make sure that this stitch is not too big. We want it to make sure that it's a nice uniform size. You don't want it too loosey-goosey. Now that we've done our chain 1, we're going to yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over, pull through 2 loops, all the way until the end, when we end with that 1 loop remaining. With Tunisian crochet, we'll always have at least 1 loop on the hook. Now, what we're going to do to create the Tunisian knit stitch is we're going to go straight through our vertical bars. So you can see here that we have these 2 vertical bars for each stitch. We've got this one that's in the front, and then we've got this one right here that is on the back side, right? So we've got the front vertical bar and the back vertical bar. What we're going to do is we're going to go straight through the center of those bars and pull up a loop. And that's it. That's as fancy as it gets. Now you're going to always skip this outside loop here. That's just going to remain your outside stitch. Before you insert your hook in between these vertical bars, make sure that this loop is not too big, right? You don't want it super loosey-goosey because it makes your border look a little bit sloppier. Now make sure that's nice and tight. We're going to go in between this first stitch here, straight on through the center of those vertical bars. We're going to come out the back side just like that. Now pull up a loop. Now, it's very important, especially in these first few rows, that you do not have these loops too tight, right? So go ahead, give yourself the leeway to pull just a little bit to make these loops a little bit taller, and that's significantly going to help with the curling. Now I'm going in between the vertical bars of the next stitch and pulling up that loop. Make sure it's nice and tall, going in between these vertical bars on this next stitch, and pull up your loops to a consistent height, as consistent as possible. All the way to the end of the row. And now we've got all of these beautiful loops. Now we're going to look at the edge stitch here, and we're going to turn it just slightly, and we're going to go under both sides of that outside stitch, just like this. So now we're going to pull up a loop here, and we've got all 12 loops back on our hook. So now we are ready to do our backward pass again. So now we're going to chain 1, and again, make sure that this chain that you do here is consistent in height with the stitch below it, as you're eyeballing it, but as consistent as possible with the stitch below it and with the height of the rest of the row. And that's how you're going to make sure that your edges stay nice and clean. Now I'm yarning over, pulling through 2 all the way to the end of the row. Like I said, this return pass for this stitch is always going to be the same. We're going to do that chain 1 on the outside and then yarn over, pull through 2 until we get to the end here. That's our first actual row of Tunisian knit stitch. Now we're going to make sure that this loop that's on the hook is not loosey-goosey. We're going to pull it nice and tight. Not too tight, obviously, but we're going to make sure that it's nice and taut. We're going to go into the center of that first stitch right here, straight on through to the back side in between those bars, and pull up a loop. Now remember, you don't want this loop to be too short because it will help with the curling. So go ahead and pull that up a little bit. It might look like this one is too small compared to this one, but that's perfectly fine. Because the knit stitches were going down into the row below, it tends to make, that's why it's curling so bad, is that we're going down and we're not accommodating for the height of that stitch. Pulling up a loop in every stitch all the way to the end. When we get to the end, we're going to turn it sideways slightly. Going to find these 2 vertical bars for the outside of that edge stitch, pull up a loop, and now we should have our 12 loops again, and we are ready to do our backward pass. So we're going to chain 1. We're going to make sure that that is the consistent height with the stitch below it and to the side, and then we're going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2, all the way to the end of the row. I'll do a couple more rows with you here, and then we'll do our bind off row where we do the Tunisian slip stitch knitwise. Make sure that's a good size on your hook. Go into that first stitch and let's just do some knit stitching across both sides of that stitch. Chain 1, make sure that that stitch is a good size. And now we're going to yarn over, pull through 2. Isn't that pretty how they stack right on top of each other like that? They look just like actual knit stitches. Now that we've got that last row completed, let's go ahead and do our bind off row. Now what we're going to do to bind off, it's very simple. We're going to go straight through the center of the stitch like we have been, and then we're just going to slip stitch. Just like that. You want to make sure that your slip stitches are a decent size. You don't want them to be over large, and you certainly don't want to pull them so tight that the top of your piece starts to pull in a little bit. So let's go ahead and continue slip stitching all the way across. When we get to this outside stitch, we're going to go into both sides of the outside to make that final slip stitch here. So this is it when it comes to the Tunisian knit stitch. Isn't that fun? By holding up your loops to a consistent size on both sides, you're making sure that your piece isn't going wonky in one direction or another. I hope you love the Tunisian knit stitch and that you'll use it in a pattern soon. Thanks for watching.